Hi, my name is Elizabeth. What's your name?
My name is Mario.
Nice to meet you, Mario. You said you had some questions for me that you wanted to ask about?
Yep.
All right. What questions do you have?
So firstly, what do you love most about the economics major?
I would say I personally found my niche and really enjoy economics because what I really like doing as part of being an economics major is that it's kind of like a mixture of a social science and also doing STEM math work too. So one of the things that we do in my recent project was doing wages and how what statistical significant factors can you incorporate into your average general weekly wages. So we do females versus males, if you're part of a labor union, if you work part-time, if you're married, and other factors like how much education you have, how many years of experience. And I really like the idea of trying to break down what is statistically significant to incorporate what these up to factors to make up what would be considered what would impact your wage. So that's something that I find really interesting is one of the aspects of economics. The economics degree is also very versatile because there's a lot of things you can do with it. And there's a lot of different routes that you can go with it with your studies and whatnot for further education or whatnot. So that's what I really like about the economics major. What was your next question?
Let me pull it up here.
One moment. Yeah, no problem.
So, why did you apply for the economics major?
Now that is an interesting tale, but fair warning, it will have some unpleasantries that will discuss grooming and pedophilia. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
I started college at 15 with Nevada Virtual Academy and Western Nevada College. I earned my Bachelor of Arts degree at the same time as my high school diploma. I still graduated early because I started doing high school courses when I was in the 7th grade. So I graduated with my high school diploma. I was surrounded and jumped by other people my age. And graduated high school at 17 with my Bachelor of Arts degree and my high school diploma. So when I was transferring to UNLV, I had my high school transcript, my AP transcript, my WNC transcript, and also I took a couple classes at CSN. So needless to say, my application process was already a little messy because I had a lot of stuff transferring over. And then I wasn't entirely, and I have a lot of varied interests, so I wasn't entirely certain what I was going to do. So I initially enrolled as undergraduate exploring, and part of the Jumpstart program was you get to be treated as a freshman for registration purposes, for scholarship purposes, but you also get the junior registration purposes who've taken so many credits. And also part of the Jumpstart program is that I actually never had to take your business seminar class, or any seminar class for that matter, because that got waived and or was part of the Jumpstart program with the Associate Arts degree. And so after that, I took in fall 2019, when I started at 17, Chemistry 121 with Dr. Berg and lab, Biology 196, which is now changed to Biology 190, it's kind of the intro pre-med or pre-pharmacy route with Dr. Rafferty. And then I had Physics 151 with Dr. Hurst. It was also my first time actually having an actual physical lab and actually doing sciences like that. And my dear sister also had these same professors and warned me against this and said, that is a terrible idea. I'm like, it'll be fine, right? I slipped on a blueberry and a speaker fell on my head before my first physics exam. And then also part of being a non-traditional student that is underage, although we're not necessarily used as qualified as a non-traditional student per how the way CSUN was defining stuff, even though we should try to make changes to that. Because non-traditional students, they define as oh, those are more older than the average people, those they did in the military, and then afterwards they're starting to work stuff again, or a single mom trying to put herself through schooling, wanting to support herself. But non-traditional students on the younger end are not necessarily fully defined as younger students and supported as that way. And I actually had to be dealt with being in the STEM field. I dealt with parts of the discrimination I dealt with was being belittled and not being taken as seriously because I was younger and a child. And another thing I dealt with was rampant sexual harassment, assault, and rape during the courses by peers in those science courses during 2019 to 2020. So I actually wound up, and then it was further stigmatized by a certain RSO group that I would go to because oh yeah, my sister went to this group. And they would actually encourage and actually use me to get more people to go to their club events, as well as would encourage certain people to continue to pursue me, saying age is just a number, even though they were males that were older than my sister and 26, and I was 17. So that was awkward, and needless to say, the way I thought I was going to do the pre-med route or do pre-pharmacy or do something in the STEM field that would be more proper thing like that. And the way the university treated me, at least in the STEM field, at least from my academic peers, felt like the only way I could get through and succeed was through essentially fucking my way through the top, even though I'm very intelligent and also I was a child and it was just a mess. So I took a breathe in fall 2019, you know what? I'm going to take from the break from all the sciences. One, because of all the labs making me super sick, and two, from all the personal crap that happened. And in spring of 2020, I took Econ 103 with Dr. Robinson, the introduction to mathematics. I decided to do a couple courses before I get officially into the business major with my stage arts degree, because I completed everything but like a couple courses because I wasn't sure what I was going to do anyway. So I was still considered undeclared at the time. So I had Econ 103, but because of the Associate of Arts degree thing, I could only be considered undeclared or exploring. Because you can only be undeclared or exploring until after you reach 60 credits, and afterwards you actually have to declare a major, because the whole point of the undergrad and exploring is to take all of your gen ed stuff, to kind of like get like a feel for like what you want to do, and then afterwards like, okay, your last 2 years you still have, that's the part where like, okay, you actually have to pick something that's specialized in something. So the spring semester, you know what, I'm going to take a break from sciences. They're obviously not for me. Clearly there's science slipping on a blueberry speaking fall in my head, and the personal issues that happened with peers that was kind of upsetting. I took Econ 103 with Dr. Robinson, Econ 261 with Dr. McCoy, Accounting 202 with Professor Ciliano, and then I had some Italian foreign language course that was online. And it was just the amount of change that was difference between how the STEM department treated me as a legal minor and a non-traditional student compared to what the business people are was completely just a mindset thing. Because I thought like, oh yeah, business school, you think of like kind of like Mad Men, so they kind of be a little bit more sexist or something like that in that regard thing. So that's kind of like I wasn't necessarily as interested in going to the business school. But I found it was just like a huge relief and click. They found like, oh yeah, they did know that I was underage because I wasn't turning 18 until April 2nd. And rather than doing the belittling thing or having to deal with pervy peers, it was like, oh cool, that's really neat. And Dr. McCoy was like, oh yeah, I used to teach a 12-year-old this economic statistics course and stuff like that. So it was, I felt a lot more welcomed in this business major. So that's why I went up choosing the business major. And Dr. Robinson actually taught my sister Econ 103. And he always tries to, because the econ department is very small and there's not a lot of female students that actually go through the econ department. So he's very encouraging, he's like, hey, go become an econ major thing, and tries to encourage females, especially females, to become an econ major thing. And he just got this wry little smile when I told him like, oh yeah, I'm thinking of applying as an econ major, because he knew my sister who went through medical school is like, ah yes. I could tell like, he didn't get my sister because she went through the medical school route, but he got like the younger one and stuff like that, and he was super happy about that. And I have found every single econ class that I've ever taken to be an absolute delight, with all of the professors being very understanding and all of my peers actually being, I can actually converse with them, and I never had to deal with the discriminatory type behavior that I had to deal with the STEM field department. That being said, things have changed a little bit to where I actually, in the next following semester, I did decide to I'll take one science course in lab, because I just wanted to prove to myself personally that I could still do that and not being like, being treated or being kind of treated like you're just a dumb Barbie doll thing, like saying like you can't go through this thing. Like I wanted to personally prove to myself that I could still do it, so I actually had an econ major with biology minor, and I completed my second year of biology and actually took physics 180, the calculus version of physics 151, as well as chemistry 122 with Dr. Orgel. Now eventually with them, I actually opened up to them a little bit with Professor Pesco, who's now actually, she taught physics 180. And Dr. Orgel was actually neighbors with my Professor Econ 441, Professor McDonough. So actually with online virtual office hours, I'd go see Dr. Orgel, and we discussed things about chemistry and whatnot. And we talked about conditional probability, which is a commonality between the two fields. And the next thing over, I go talk to McDonough about stuff because we were learning theta. And then it was like, oh yeah, how are they? Because they were actually neighbors. And then Professor McDonough, Dr. McDonough, actually has his wife that teaches public health here. So it was like a lot of like interdisciplinary stuff, and I opened up personally to Dr. McDonough and Dr. Org about personal issue stuff. And then especially because it was mainly relying on a certain problematic individual in the physics department area. And then later on, I was able to meet with Dr. Al-Samat, who was a professor in the physics thing that was doing had a huge new discovery thing in fall 2020-ish about superthermal conductivity. And actually, because I was so happy with the stuff going on, I made 2020 New Year's cards and put them on bulletin boards of my econ professors and my accounting professor, and all the professors I felt like they really welcomed me and helped me out a bit. And I actually ran into Dr. Al-Samat, and because he was celebrating with his staff group and getting crumble cookies and stuff, like I was telling him, hey, I made all A's this semester, and he's like, oh wait, aren't you Dr. Orgill's student? Because I attended one of his meetings and stuff like that. Like, oh yes, I am. And so we were actually talking about stuff that happened. I kind of like would be like, oh, why are you an econ major? That seems a little strange because like you're doing all the sciences too. And then shortly thereafter, well, correlation may not equal causation, something you very much will learn in econ, as well as nothing is ever free. Like you're saying like, oh yeah, your student UNLV tickets are quote unquote free, but it's actually paid through all your fees and it's part of being a student, so it's all encompassing free, so nothing is ever free. That's a key lesson to learn in econ. Shortly thereafter, there was a new change in the head department of the physics department because the problematic student, when I did try to get help with a certain professor, they were a little less than helpful, didn't necessarily catch on to it when I needed help. And then when I chose to do Physics 180 with Professor Cusco, the lab director that was also part of the 151, because I ended up choosing the audit class because I felt so uncomfortable going there, as well as slipping on a blueberry speaker following me before the first exam, not necessarily, maybe it's a sign, just a little bit. And so after that, the professor did seem to reach out to me. He's like, oh yeah, didn't you take Physics 151 way back when? And you did really well in the labs. I can see about looking into like getting that weight for you because I'm the lab director, so you don't actually have to take the lab too, because the labs for 151 and 180 are the exact same. The only difference is like some minor calculations for like the lecture, because the Physics 151 tries to teach physics without calculus, whereas Physics 180 tries to teach the physics with calculus. Physics with calculus makes way much more sense though, in my opinion. And although I chose not to, I didn't want to be like, I couldn't necessarily actually like wait because I actually audited the course, even though I still like did like the exams and everything, and I did super well in the labs where I didn't have problematic people, but not so hot on like his lecture stuff. So there was reparation made, and he was a lot more nicer to me. And during spring 2021, I had a lot of ongoing health problems going on. And I didn't know at the time, but when I would usually have to send like these super long emails saying, hey, I need extension things. And Dr. Theriot, who taught Econ 303 and Econ 304, I was taking his Econ 304 money and banking class at the time, told me like, oh, well actually, you can apply for the DRC with all these health problems, so you don't have to keep sending me these emails and we can just give you proper accommodations for it. And so I felt really invited to Econ because even the professors, when I talked to them about stuff, definitely a plus, so always try to go to office hours. Even if it's not just to discuss the classes, but to discuss like just saying, hey, here are my graduation plans, or here's what I'm thinking about doing with my class, or like, this is some interesting research, or even asking about their own research is very helpful and beneficial. And because there may be more, there is just a certain disinformation thing, that there's a certain econ thing you can talk about, like there's like, and health insurance, like where the person that's trying to get health insurance knows more about their health than the person that's trying to like figure out what type of insurance would get them what we should rate it as. There's a similar thing happening where it's information to service, so not everyone trying to student will necessarily know all of the information available to campus. And so talking to professors about stuff, they can like, oh yeah, have you tried about using this research? If you're struggling with that, like, well, actually we have tutoring at the ASI UNLV Tutoring Center, or actually what's going on starting next year, there's going to be a differential fee at the town hall meeting where they're going to try to open another specific tutoring center at the Lee Business Building, as well as the accounting places have like there's an accounting organization that has specific organization which is just for accounting classes. So talking to the professors is usually pretty helpful when you're trying to get through stuff, especially the Lee Business School. I found it to be just an instant change of pace of just a click of just, I felt far more welcome in that environment. And so because I felt far more welcome in the econ thing, not only did I eventually like love the actual subject, but I felt far more comfortable with like, this is my niche and I feel welcomed here, so I'm going to make it my econ major, and that's why I chose to pursue economics as my major.
Well, first off, I'm sorry that you went through all the lamentable things that you went through.
Yeah, it took a while because part of spring 2021, I was eventually, I had to deal with some personal health issue stuff, as well as I eventually got the help that I needed. Don't feel afraid to use CAPS or anything like that to help process the sexual trauma and whatnot that happens. So I recently was able to get some medication starting in October to help with the anxiety and depression that was onset, and I'm actually feeling a lot better with everything about that, and I'm weaning myself off the medication now because there's a part of the medication is that it gives me a little annoying shakiness. So still part of the DSA asked saying, hey, can I get some notes from class because I'm super shaky and I can't necessarily make good notes, as well as sometimes like if I'll get like super exhausted. That's more of a physical thing. I'll get like super exhausted and like somehow I'll just pass out, I'll get lethargic. Because like in spring 2020 I had a lot of medical testing stuff, and so the testing would be like, it would sometimes be challenging where I just need like extensions or rearrange schedules and stuff like that, and the professors were very accommodating with the DRC, things like that for it. So that's another thing like I really like that. But what was your next question?
Well, you just knocked out questions 2 and 4, so I think I'll just go with the final question. What was the most challenging course required for your major?
Okay, that is
for the economics major?
for an economics major. Okay, I'm going to say that kind of depends. I was struggling a lot in spring 2021 when I was taking my courses. That was mainly because I had a lot of health stuff going on. So I'm usually more of a straight A type of student because of all my health stuff. I want to making like A's and B's. But that was mainly just because I was struggling staying on top of assignments and anything like that. Not necessarily the courses I found particularly challenging. However, I don't necessarily find them particularly challenging because I really enjoy the subject. And when you have a passion for a subject, it's a lot easier to learn with it. However, I would say the thing would be like most challenging on technology for what you have to spend the most studying time for. It depends upon your skill set. If you're more math inclined in econ, then you'll probably find the math or coding one with SATA a lot easier than the ones where you have to write a bunch of public policies and writing. I am a huge fan of writing, and I can do it. It's just like I'm not as huge a fan of it, so I find that necessarily more frustrating. However, I would say the overall most challenging course would most likely be the capstone course for 495, where you have to. The way we're doing it is we have the 4 projects with a bunch of SATA coding. And a very huge project where we have to analyze data. The thing where I was explaining about the wages, that was one of the projects we were working on. And you can do a group project of up to 4 people, and after you do those 4 projects, you then have to come up with your own project idea, do your own research to get analysis of it, of the data, and then form your own thesis and writing of the script, and then you present it. However, because it's online, I think we're supposed to be doing a video presentation of it rather than in person. So that's where I say would be technically the most challenging part of it. And then in general, if you struggle with like econ coding and stuff like that, I would say probably econ 440Y might be a little more challenging for you. Or if you're challenged with math in general, econ 440, I love it. It was like math, so where we learn like Lagrangian equations and whatnot. So I really enjoyed it because I really like math. But if those are not necessarily as mathematically inclined, because you technically don't need to do math when you want to get into any of like the econ courses, but it does certainly help having taken Calc 1 or even Calc 2 to understand the material that we're going through, even if they don't necessarily require it.
I see.
Any other questions or comments?
Not at the moment. Thank you very much.